The rich man shoves his twin daughters out of the car and speeds away. The girls run through the forest, tripping over roots. A white horse watches them from afar, still and silent. But before we go on, if you love animals as much as we do, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any heartfelt stories. Thank you. Now, back to our story. The golden morning light bathed the vast fields of Montana, creating an almost poetic contrast with the darkness settling inside the main mansion of White Pine Ranch. Eleanor and Evelyn Montgomery, 5-year-old twins with wheat-colored hair and eyes as blue as a summer sky, ran through the dew-dampened field, their laughter echoing across the property like delicate bells. Their identical white dresses with blue details billowed in the breeze as they headed toward the stable where Aspen, the majestic Palomino horse with golden coat and almost white mane, waited with apparent patience. "Aspen, we brought an apple." Eleanor, the more talkative of the two, raised the fruit, while Evelyn, the more observant one, caressed the animal's silky muzzle. The horse tilted his head, his amber eyes seeming to hold more understanding than any animal should possess. What the girls didn't notice, protected by their childish innocence, was their father's silhouette watching from an upstairs window. William Montgomery had once been an admired man in the small town of Pinewood Falls, the son of pioneers who had transformed raw land into one of the county's largest properties. His charm and business acumen had made him a pillar of the community. His marriage to Caroline, the daughter of the town's only bookstore owner, had seemed to complete the picture of an enviable life. Until Caroline was gone. An undetected complication during the twins' birth. That's what they said. A tragedy, as described in the local newspaper's obituary. For William, it was the day his heart transformed into an empty chamber, echoing only with growing resentment. With each passing day, looking at his daughters became an exercise in self-control. He saw Caroline's restless curiosity in Eleanor. In Evelyn, he found his wife's penetrating, questioning gaze. Together, they were a constant reminder of his loss and, more disturbingly, of the fortune that was now blocked from his reach. "Would you like your breakfast on the veranda, Mr. Montgomery?" The voice of Martha, the housekeeper who had been caring for the property and the girls for 4 years, interrupted his thoughts. "No, Martha. I'll take it in my office. I need to finalize some matters." His voice emerged firm, hiding the agitation that simmered beneath his composed appearance, and let the girls know that today we'll do something special, a trip. Martha raised her eyebrows in poorly disguised surprise. William almost never participated in activities with his daughters, delegating them to the housekeeper, the private tutor who came 3 times a week, or any of the 15 employees on the property. "They'll be excited, sir. Should I prepare them for what time?" "Right after lunch. Nothing elaborate, just a simple picnic in the forest." He turned, fixing his gaze again on the distant scene where the twins were now feeding the horse. "And Martha, don't mention this to anyone. I want to make a surprise. For everyone. Something special." The housekeeper nodded and withdrew, while William continued to contemplate the horizon, his fingers rhythmically drumming on the window frame. In the stable, the twins continued their private conversation. With Aspen, this was no ordinary horse. Caroline had brought him from her family farm when she married, and for nearly a decade he had been her companion on daily rides through the property's fields and forests. Since the girl's birth, he seemed to have transferred his silent loyalty to them, following them with his gaze whenever they were within his sight. "Do you think Dad will let us ride you when we're bigger, Aspen?" Evelyn whispered in the horse's ear, which moved as if understanding the question. Miss Preston said, "We can start lessons when we turn 6, answered Eleanor, referring to their private tutor. "But you already know we rode secretly last summer, don't you, Aspen?" She laughed, covering her mouth with her small hand as if sharing a valuable secret. What the girls didn't know was that in the main house's office, William was now speaking in a low tone on the phone. "Everything is prepared, Gregory. The documents are ready? Excellent." He paused, listening attentively. "No, everyone will think it was an accident. Traumatic, no doubt, but accidents happen, especially with curious children in dense forests." Another pause. "Yes, I understand the legal implications. Caroline's will is specific about the girls, custody and the trust funds, but there are always alternatives." When he hung up, William felt an unusual calmness. Months of careful planning would culminate this afternoon. The forest in the northern part of the property, densely wooded and rarely visited even by the region's forest rangers, would be perfect. The trails branched and confused even the most experienced. A man could easily claim to have lost his way. Two small children alone, without food or water. The chances of survival were minimal. It was a permanent solution to what he considered a permanent problem. When Martha announced that lunch was served, the twins ran in from the veranda where they had been playing with cloth dolls. Their little faces flushed with excitement as they entered the dining room made William momentarily avert his gaze. "Daddy," Martha said, "we're going on a picnic." Eleanor's voice overflowed with enthusiasm. "And can I bring my drawing book?" asked Evelyn, more subdued but equally excited. William forced a smile. "Of course, it will be a special afternoon. We can take Aspen too. After all, he knows those trails as well as I do." The girls' eyes lit up when they heard the horse would accompany them. Throughout lunch, they talked non-stop about all the things they wanted to see: squirrels, rare birds, maybe even a deer if they stayed very quiet. William observed them, with a lump in his throat that he attributed to nervousness about what he was about to do. For a brief moment, so brief that he didn't even consciously register it, he wondered if there might be another way. But then he remembered the conversation with his lawyer. As long as the twins were under his guardianship, the fortune left by Caroline would remain untouchable until their majority. A fortune that, ironically, he desperately needed now, after a series of failed investments that threatened to ruin everything his family had built for generations. After lunch, Martha helped the girls prepare, dressing them in light but sturdy jackets despite the mild June heat. "The weather can change quickly in the mountains," she explained, tightening the strings of their identical straw hats. "And don't stray from your father, promise?" "We promise," they said in unison, before running toward the stable where William already waited with Aspen saddled. The Palomino horse seemed restless, backing slightly as William approached to adjust the straps of the small picnic basket to the saddle. His amber eyes fixed on the man with an intensity that made William look away, uncomfortable. "This animal has always looked at me like that," he muttered to himself, as if he knew something I don't. The twins arrived running, and the atmosphere changed instantly. Aspen relaxed, lowering his head to receive the girls' caresses as William helped them up, positioning them comfortably on the wide saddle. "Will you be all right up there? It's not too cramped." "No, Daddy, we're fine," Eleanor replied while Evelyn just smiled, holding firmly onto the horse's mane. William took the reins and began guiding the animal along the path that led to the dense forest marking the northern limit of the property. He looked back one last time, seeing Martha waving from the back door of the house. He waved back, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The trail was initially wide and well marked, winding between ancient oaks and towering pines. As they advanced, however, the path narrowed, becoming less defined. The tree canopies formed an increasingly dense canopy over their heads, filtering the sunlight into dancing patterns on the pine needle-covered ground. Aspen moved with calculated steps, but his uneasiness was perceptible in the small snorts and the way his ears constantly moved, attentive to every sound in the forest. He seemed to sense something that humans couldn't detect. "It's all right, boy," William tried to calm him, but his voice came out tense. "Daddy, "Is Aspen scared?" asked Evelyn, her perceptive gaze catching the change in the animal's behavior. "No, dear, he's just alert. There are many animals in the forest." After almost an hour of walking, they reached a small circular clearing where light managed to penetrate, creating an illuminated space amid the green density. William stopped, contemplating the spot for a moment before helping the girls down. "Can we have our picnic here?" asked Eleanor, hopping excitedly. "Actually," William hesitated briefly, "I thought I'd check out a special view a little further ahead. Could you wait here? I promise I won't be long." "We can go with you, Daddy," suggested Evelyn, her blue eyes suddenly concerned. "It's a very narrow trail, dear. The three of us wouldn't fit." He forced a light tone. "Besides, look at all the beautiful flowers you can collect here. When I get back, we can make flower crowns like your mother used to make." The mention of their mother always worked. Both nodded, though Evelyn continued to observe him with that look that seemed to see beyond his words. William tied Aspen to a nearby trunk, slightly loosening the reins so the animal could graze, and removed the picnic basket. "Here are some sandwiches and juice for you. Stay exactly in this spot, understand? Don't explore farther." "Yes, Daddy," they answered together, already distracted by the wild daisies that dotted the clearing. William hesitated one last time, looking at his daughters, so small against the immensity of the forest, and at the Palomino horse, which stared at him with those penetrating amber eyes. For a second, just 1 second, he almost gave up. Then he remembered the meeting scheduled for the next day with his creditors, the veiled threats, the fortune that Caroline's will kept out of his reach as long as the twins were under his responsibility. He turned and walked away, his steps quickening as he distanced himself. Behind him, Aspen neighed loudly, pulling forcefully at the reins, as if he understood exactly what was happening. The twins, absorbed in their flower collecting, barely noticed the sound of their father's footsteps disappearing among the trees, nor the distressed neigh of the horse, now struggling against the rope that held him. At first, the twins didn't notice that anything was wrong. Eleanor, always the more talkative and impulsive one, continued collecting wildflowers and chattering about how she would make the prettiest crown of all. Evelyn, naturally quieter and more observant, was the first to notice that the sun had moved considerably in the sky, casting longer shadows across the clearing. "Ellie," she called her sister by her nickname, her small voice carrying a newly discovered worry. "I think Daddy's taking a long time." Eleanor paused, holding a handful of daisies against the chest of her light blue jacket. "How long has it been?" Evelyn shrugged. They still couldn't read clocks properly. "A long time," was all she could say, while her blue eyes scanned the edge of the clearing, searching for any sign of their father. Aspen's distressed neigh broke the relative silence of the forest. The Palomino was pulling at the rope that held him with renewed strength, his amber eyes fixed on a specific direction in the forest. Not the path William had taken, but in the opposite direction, as if indicating an alternative route. "Aspen is nervous," said Evelyn, cautiously approaching the horse. Her small hand touched the animal's muzzle, trying to calm him. "It's okay, boy. Daddy will be back soon." But there was a growing tension in the air, something that even 5-year-old children could intuitively feel. The wind began to blow stronger through the trees, making the leaves whisper as if sharing dark secrets. The shadows in the clearing lengthened even more as the sun continued its descent toward the horizon, hidden beyond the dense pine canopy. "Evie, I'm cold," complained Eleanor, letting the flowers fall to the ground as she rubbed her arms. "Why is Daddy taking so long?" Evelyn didn't respond immediately. She was thinking about something she had overheard by chance a few weeks earlier when she should have been asleep. Her father's voice had come from his office, tense and agitated, speaking on the phone. "The girls and that damned custody clause are the only thing preventing me from accessing the money. If they weren't in the way..." At the time, she hadn't fully understood the meaning of those words, but something about them had made her feel afraid. Now, alone in the forest, those words returned with frightening clarity. "Ellie," she finally said, "what if Daddy? What if he doesn't come back?" Eleanor's eyes widened, shocked by the suggestion. "Of course he'll come back. Why wouldn't he? I heard him talking once, about us being a problem, about money." "What? When?" "It doesn't matter. I just think we should try to get back home by ourselves." Aspen neighed again, so loudly that both girls jumped in surprise. The Palomino horse was now pulling the reins with renewed force, his hooves beating the ground repeatedly as if trying to communicate something urgent. "He wants to go home too," said Eleanor, approaching the animal. "We should untie him." Evelyn hesitated. "What if Daddy gets angry? What if we never see Daddy again?" countered Eleanor, verbalizing the fear that was beginning to grow in both of them. With small, trembling fingers, Evelyn undid the knot that tied the reins to the trunk. Immediately Aspen moved, but not to flee as one might expect from a frightened horse. Instead, he positioned himself beside the girls, lowering himself slightly, as if inviting them to mount. "I think he wants to take us home," whispered Eleanor, a glimmer of hope lighting up her eyes. "But we've never ridden alone before." Evelyn bit her lip, torn between the fear of falling and the growing desperation of remaining alone in the forest that now seemed increasingly dark and hostile. Aspen snorted softly, remaining patiently crouched. It was as if he understood the gravity of the situation better than the children themselves. "Let's go together," decided Eleanor, taking the initiative. With a joint effort, they managed to climb onto the wide saddle, mentally thanking the Palomino's low height compared to other horses at the ranch. Once settled, Aspen rose smoothly and began to walk, not along the trail they had traveled with their father, but on a narrow and almost invisible path that wound between the trees in the opposite direction. "Where is he going?" asked Eleanor, clinging tightly to the golden mane. "I don't know, but he knows the forest. Mom always said Aspen had a map in his heart," replied Evelyn, recalling the stories Martha had told them about their mother. Meanwhile, at the ranch, Martha was looking at the clock for the 10th time in an hour. The picnic was taking too long. The sun was beginning to set, painting the Montana sky with shades of orange and red that in another context would be merely beautiful, but which now brought a grim foreboding. "They should have been back hours ago," she muttered to herself, going to the kitchen window for the umpteenth time. Her discomfort increased when she noticed something in the stable that she hadn't seen before. The girl's backpack, the one that normally stayed in their room, was partially hidden under the straw in one of the empty stalls. When she examined it, she found extra clothes, the twins' favorite teddy bears, and some packets of cookies, as if someone had prepared the girls for a prolonged absence. A chill ran down her spine. Something was deeply wrong. Without wasting more time, Martha called Roy, the ranch foreman, a man of few words but deeply loyal to Caroline Montgomery's memory. "Roy, Mr. Montgomery and the girls haven't returned from the picnic yet. And I found this in the stable." She showed him the backpack. "I have a bad feeling." Roy examined the backpack, his sun-wrinkled face becoming increasingly serious. "Where did he say they were going?" "To the North Forest. But he didn't specify exactly where. The North Forest has hundreds of acres, most unexplored." Roy frowned. "I'll gather some men." In the forest, Aspen continued his steady path, moving with surprising confidence between trees and over irregular terrain, always maintaining a rhythm that didn't shake the girls clinging to his mane too much. The sun was now rapidly disappearing, and the first signs of twilight were turning the forest into a labyrinth of shadows and unsettling sounds. "I'm scared, Evie," whispered Eleanor, leaning closer to her sister. "Me too," admitted Evelyn. "But we're with Aspen. He won't let anything bad happen to us." As if understanding the words of comfort, the horse snorted softly, his ears moving backward momentarily, as if checking on the well-being of his small riders. After what seemed like an eternity to the girls, but in reality was no more than 40 minutes, Aspen stopped abruptly, his ears erect and alert. A distant sound of running water reached them. "Is that a river?" asked Eleanor. "I think so. Daddy mentioned once that there was a river on Mr. Parker's property." Parker. The name resonated in both their memories. Jacob Parker was the ranch's former horse trainer, a man who had cared for Aspen since the animal had arrived at the property with their mother. William had fired him shortly after Caroline's passing, citing cost-cutting, but the girls had always heard Martha say that the real reason was that Parker had been very close to their mother. Aspen resumed his pace, now more determined, following the sound of the water. Soon they reached a small wooden cabin by the edge of a crystal-clear stream. A yellowish light escaped through the cracks in the windows, covered by simple curtains. The Palomino horse neighed loudly, as if announcing their arrival. Almost immediately, the cabin door opened, revealing the imposing figure of Jacob Parker. At 55, with a graying beard and penetrating eyes, he seemed the personification of the resistance and wisdom of the American frontier. "Good Lord," he murmured upon seeing the two small girls mounted on Aspen alone, their little faces pale with cold and fear. "Eleanor? Evelyn? Mr. Parker!" exclaimed Eleanor, recognizing him instantly, despite the years that had passed. With agile movements for his age, Parker approached and helped the girls down, noticing how they trembled in their light jackets, inadequate for the approaching night. "What happened? Where is your father?" The twins exchanged glances, and it was Evelyn who answered with painful simplicity. "He left us in the forest. He said he was going to check something and never came back." Parker stood motionless for a moment, processing those words, the shock quickly giving way to contained anger and a terrible understanding. "Come inside, girls. Let's warm you up first, and then you'll tell me everything, every detail." As he guided them inside, Parker stopped to stroke Aspen's muzzle, his eyes meeting the animal's in a moment of mutual understanding. "You brought them to me. Good job. Old friend." Aspen snorted softly, as if responding, his amber eyes reflecting the faint light of the lanterns hanging on the cabin porch. Inside the cozy cabin, Parker wrapped the girls in thick blankets and served them hot chocolate in ceramic mugs that seemed gigantic in their small hands. As they sipped, he listened attentively to every detail of the story. The sudden trip, the isolated clearing, the long wait. When they mentioned the words Evelyn had overheard about being in the way, Parker's face visibly hardened. "Girls, I need to step out for a moment to settle Aspen in the stable. Stay here, finish your hot chocolate. There are cookies in that tin on the table." He pointed to a tin decorated with horse motifs. "Don't open the door to anyone, understood?" They nodded solemnly, still too shaken to question an adult's instructions. Outside, Parker led Aspen to a small stable next to the cabin, carefully removing the saddle and reins. As he brushed the animal's golden coat, he spoke in a low voice, as if sharing secrets. "I knew this day would come, old friend. Caroline knew too. That's why she left those documents with me." His wrinkled fingers worked with an efficiency born of decades handling horses. "Now, we need to protect the girls. You've done your part. Now it's my turn." Aspen neighed softly, nudging Parker's shoulder with his muzzle, as if expressing agreement. At the ranch, the search had already begun. Roy had gathered 5 men, all armed with powerful flashlights and practical knowledge of White Pine's lands. Martha watched them leave, her heart tight with a fear she couldn't completely name. "Pray they're just lost," murmured one of the men, verbalizing what everyone was thinking, but no one had the courage to say. Meanwhile, Jacob Parker was also preparing. After ensuring the girls were warm and safe, He took his old but well-maintained rifle, not with the intention of harming anyone, but as a precaution against the dangers of the forest at night. He put an extra flashlight, a first aid kit, and a radio communicator he kept for emergencies in his backpack. Before leaving, he returned to the cabin, where he found the twins asleep on the sofa, clinging to each other like cubs, seeking warmth and comfort. "I'm going to find your father, little ones," he whispered, though he knew they couldn't hear him. "And when I do, we're going to have a long talk about the value of a promise and about the true meaning of fatherhood." He closed the door silently, locking it for safety. In the stable, Aspen raised his head when Parker entered, as if expecting him. "No, friend, you've done enough for today. Rest." Parker stroked the muscular neck of the animal, admiring once again the intelligence and loyalty of this extraordinary being. "You deserve all the oats and apples I can find after what you did today." And with that, Jacob Parker disappeared into the darkness of the forest, guided only by the light of his flashlight and a deep knowledge of these lands that had been his home for decades. Somehow, he knew exactly where he needed to go and who he needed to find. The northern Montana forest seemed to have a life of its own during the night. The sounds changed, becoming deeper, more primitive. The wind whispered among the trees, telling ancient stories of betrayals and redemptions, as Jacob Parker advanced with the determination of a man guided by something greater than himself. He had known William Montgomery for 15 years, since Caroline had brought Aspen to the ranch as part of her marriage dowry. At the time, William had seemed genuinely in love, his eyes shining when he looked at his young wife. But Jacob had always perceived something disturbing in that shine, a cold calculation, as if Caroline were more a valuable asset than a companion. "It was the money, wasn't it, William?" he muttered to himself as he followed what he believed to be the most likely trail. It was always the money. His flashlight illuminated the path ahead, revealing fallen branches and slippery stones. Years of caring for the property's horses had given him an intimate knowledge of these woods. He knew where the trails forked, where they were most dangerous, and most importantly, where someone might take two small children if they wanted them never to be found. Miles away, at the ranch, Martha waited in tense vigil on the main house's veranda. Her gaze alternated between the darkness of the forest and the illuminated windows of William's office, where she had found something that confirmed her worst fears. Documents detailing Caroline's will, with handwritten notes in the margins about impediments and obstacle removal. "Roy is right," she whispered to herself. "This was no accident." Inside Parker's cabin, the twins slept the exhausted sleep of the innocent, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the forest. Eleanor, always the protector despite being the more impulsive one, had placed an arm over her sister during sleep. Evelyn, in turn, held the edge of the blanket tightly, as if fearing that even this might be taken from her. In the small stable adjacent to the cabin, Aspen remained alert despite his fatigue. His ears moved at the slightest sound, his amber eyes fixed on the door as if expecting Parker's return at any moment. The Palomino horse had developed an unusual bond with the twins since their birth, as if recognizing in them the same gentle spirit of Caroline. There was something almost supernatural, though completely explicable by the refined instincts of a highly intelligent animal, in the way Aspen had managed to guide the girls through miles of dense forest to the one person who could truly help them. Meanwhile, William Montgomery walked hurriedly through another part of the forest, trying to find his way back to the ranch. His original plan was simple: return to the property, wait a few hours, and then discover that the girls had disappeared during the outing. A terrible tragedy, everyone would say. A father devastated by the loss of his daughters just 2 years after losing his wife. No one would question his grief. No one would suspect. But something had gone wrong. In his rush to get away from the clearing, he had taken a different path than planned, and was now, ironically, as lost as he had hoped his daughters would be. Damn forest, he cursed softly as he stumbled over another route. The flashlight he carried cast unsettling shadows on the trees around him, transforming innocent trunks into accusing figures. It was then that he heard it, the unmistakable sound of voices and approaching flashlights. For a moment, he thought about running in the opposite direction, but what would he say afterward? How would he explain wandering alone through the forest while his daughters were missing? Making a quick decision, William deliberately disheveled. His hair tore one of his pant knees on nearby rocks and called for help in a trembling voice. "Here, please, someone help me." The lights approached rapidly. Roy was the first to emerge from among the trees, followed by 3 other men from the ranch. "Mr. Montgomery, thank God we found you." Roy's voice carried a relief that William interpreted as genuine. "Where are the girls?" William let his body fall to its knees, portraying the despair he believed was convincing. I don't know. We stopped in a clearing for the picnic. I heard a strange noise and went to check. Told them to stay with Aspen when I came back." His voice failed theatrically. "They were gone. The horse too. I've been searching for hours." Roy and the other men exchanged glances that William couldn't fully interpret. Was there distrust there? "Martha found the girls. Backpack in the stable," said Roy, carefully observing William's reaction. "With clothes and toys." William felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't part of the plan. The backpack should have remained hidden. I prepared it for the outing," he improvised. "I wanted to do something special with them, spend the whole day out. It's been so long since we've really been a family." Roy nodded slowly, but his eyes remained cold. "Let's get back to the ranch. Perhaps the girls and the horse found their way back on their own." Yes, William clung to that possibility, although he knew it was unlikely. They're smart, and Aspen knows the way. In truth, that was his greatest fear, that the horse had somehow managed to bring the girls back safely. How would he explain having left 2 5-year-old children alone for so long? How would he justify his own disappearance for hours? On the other side of the forest, Parker continued his search. He knew that region better than most, including the clearings that William might consider sufficiently isolated for his plan. When he finally found the right clearing, recognizable by the picked flowers abandoned on the ground, the remains of a picnic and the tracks of horse hooves, he felt a mix of relief and concern. The small footprints of the girls were there, as were Aspen's, moving away in the direction he had already suspected, toward his cabin. The animal's intelligence continued to surprise him, even after all these years. Parker was about to return when his eyes caught something half hidden by vegetation at the edge of the clearing, a folded piece of paper that seemed to have fallen from someone's pocket. As he picked it up and illuminated it with his flashlight, he felt his blood freeze. It was a detailed map of the property, with escape routes marked in red pen. In the margin, notes about departure times for interstate trains and buses. There was no signature, but Parker recognized the handwriting immediately, the same he had seen so many times on work orders and payment checks. "So that was it," he murmured, carefully putting the paper in his pocket. It wasn't just an impulsive abandonment, it was premeditated, a murder by omission. That last word almost didn't leave his throat, choked by the horror of complete understanding. William Montgomery hadn't simply abandoned his daughters in a moment of desperation or negligence. He had meticulously planned to leave them to die, far enough away that no one would find them in time, with an escape route prepared for himself in case suspicions fell on him. Parker took a deep breath, trying to contain the anger that threatened to cloud his judgment. The girls were safe now. This was the priority, and he had in his hands the proof of what had really happened. "Caroline," he whispered, looking at the starry sky visible between the treetops. You knew this could happen, didn't you? That's why you made me promise. The memory of that conversation, which took place a few days before the twins' birth, returned with crystal clarity. Caroline, already sensing that her complicated pregnancy might not end well, handing him a sealed envelope. If anything happens to me, Jacob, and you ever feel that my daughters aren't safe with William, open this. Not before. At the time, he had questioned the need for such a precaution. Caroline had only smiled sadly and said, "I know the man I married better than he thinks. I hope I'm wrong, but I can't risk it." Parker had never opened the envelope. He had respected Caroline's request to the letter, keeping it in a safe hidden under the floorboards of his cabin. But now, with the deliberate abandonment of the girls, he felt that the moment had come. With that renewed certainty, Parker began the journey back to the cabin where the twins and Aspen waited. Meanwhile, at the ranch, tension was rising. William had returned with Roy and the other men, only to discover that the girls weren't there. Martha observed her employer with attentive eyes, noticing how his anxiety seemed different from the genuine despair of a father. There was something calculating in his gaze, something cold even as he played the role of concerned father. "We need to call the police," she finally declared. "No!" William's response came too quickly, making everyone in the room stare at him. He composed himself rapidly. "I mean, we can handle this ourselves. We know these lands better than any police officer." Roy crossed his arms, his face hardening. "With all due respect, sir, we have 2 small children missing in the forest at night. This requires more resources than just us." "Roy is right," Martha intervened. "I've already called Sheriff Johnson. He's gathering a search team." William felt control of the situation slipping through his fingers. Sheriff Johnson had known Caroline since childhood, had practically been an uncle to her. If anyone would suspect something wrong, it would be him. "You don't understand," William tried, his voice oscillating between authority and desperation. "I am their father. I know my daughters. They're probably playing somewhere, lost track of time." In the middle of the forest, at night. Roy couldn't hide the disdain in his voice. William was about to respond when the phone rang. Martha answered, her face expressing surprise and then intense relief. "Mr. Montgomery," she said after hanging up, "that was Jacob Parker." "Parker?" William couldn't disguise his shock. "What does that man have to do with this?" "He found the girls. They're safe at his cabin." A heavy silence fell over the room. For the others, it was a moment of pure relief. For William, it was the complete collapse of his plans. How did they get there?" His voice came out strangled. "Aspen took them," Martha replied, a strange gleam in her eyes. "Apparently, when you didn't return, they untied the horse, and he led them directly to Parker's cabin." William felt dizzy. The horse, always that damn horse, watching him with those accusing amber eyes, as if it knew exactly who he was beneath the mask of devoted father. And now the animal had ruined everything. "We need to get them immediately," he said, trying to regain control. "Parker said the girls are sleeping now," Martha intervened. "He suggested we wait until morning. He also said he has something important to discuss with you." William felt a chill run down his spine. Martha's tone, the way Roy was watching him, the fact that Parker specifically wanted to discuss something. Everything indicated they were closer to the truth than he could have imagined. "I'm going there right now," he declared, trying to sound like a father eager to see his daughters. "They're my daughters, for God's sake." Roy stepped forward, his massive body suddenly seeming more intimidating. "Sheriff Johnson will be here in 20 minutes. Perhaps it's better to wait for him before doing anything." William realized he was effectively detained, even though no one had pronounced the word. The noose was tightening, and for the first time since he had conceived his plan, he felt real fear. In Parker's cabin, the twins continued sleeping, their small bodies finally relaxed after the trauma of abandonment. Parker had just returned from his expedition to the clearing and was now sitting at the kitchen table, the envelope left by Caroline open before him, its contents confirming everything he had suspected. The secret will, validated by a lawyer, in Helena and officially registered, established that if there was any indication of negligence or abuse by William, guardianship of the girls would automatically pass to Jacob Parker. Additionally, Caroline had meticulously documented her suspicions about her husband's true intentions regarding her family's fortune, including recorded conversations where he discussed ways to access the money that was protected by custody clauses. "You were always smarter than all of us, Caroline," murmured Parker, putting the documents away again. Outside, Aspen remained vigilant in the small stable. The Palomino horse was exhausted after the journey, but refused to sleep completely, as if feeling that his mission wasn't yet fully accomplished. Once, years ago, Caroline had jokingly said that Aspen had the soul of a guardian, not a horse. "He observes, Jacob, observes and understands more than we imagine." At the time, Parker had laughed at the idea. Now, after seeing how the animal had guided the twins safely through miles of dense forest, directly to the one person who could protect them, he wasn't so sure it had been just a romantic comment. As he prepared strong coffee for the long night still ahead, Parker heard the soft sound of small footsteps. Turning, he found Evelyn standing in the kitchen doorway, her blonde hair disheveled, blue eyes still heavy with sleep. "Mr. Parker," her voice was just a whisper, "is Aspen okay?" The old trainer felt a lump in his throat. Of all the things the little girl could ask after the trauma she had experienced, her first concern was for the well-being of the animal that had saved them. "Yes, little one," he replied with a gentle voice. "Aspen is doing very well, tired but well. He was very brave today." "He knew the way," she said, approaching the table, as if he had already decided to bring us here from the start. Parker nodded slowly. "Aspen is special. Your mother always knew that." The girl's eyes lit up at the mention of Caroline. "Did you know our mother?" "Very well." Parker smiled sadly. "She's the one who brought Aspen to the ranch, you know. They were inseparable." "Like me and Ellie," said Evelyn, with the simple wisdom of a child. "Exactly like you and Ellie." Parker hesitated, then decided that the girl deserved to know at least part of the truth. "Your mother also left Aspen to protect you. In a way, that's what he did today." Evelyn nodded, as if that made perfect sense to her. "Daddy isn't coming back to get us, is he?" The question, asked with such simplicity and resignation, broke Parker's heart. How to explain to a 5-year-old child that her own father had deliberately abandoned her to die in the forest? "Evelyn," he said, choosing his words carefully, "some people don't know how to be parents. It's not your fault or your sister's. It never was." "I know," she replied, surprising him with her understanding. "He never looked us in the eyes, not like you and Martha do, not like Aspen does." Parker felt tears threatening to form. The perception of this child of just 5 years was extraordinary and devastating at the same time. "Well," he cleared his throat, regaining his composure, "I can guarantee you one thing. From now on, you will always be safe. Your mother made sure of that." Evelyn didn't ask what he meant. She just nodded as if she already knew instinctively that a fundamental change had occurred in her small world. "Can I see Aspen before I go back to bed?" Parker smiled, recognizing in her the same spirit as Caroline. "Of course you can. He'll be happy to see you." Together they walked to the small stable where Aspen, upon seeing them, immediately raised his head, his amber eyes fixing on the girl, as if checking that she was really all right. "Thank you for saving us, Aspen," Evelyn whispered, extending her small hand to touch the animal's muzzle. The horse snorted softly, leaning into the child's touch. In that simple moment, Parker felt as if he were witnessing the continuation of a circle begun long before. Caroline, Aspen, the twins, a chain of protection and love that not even William's betrayal had managed to break. Outside, the first signs of dawn began to color the horizon, announcing the beginning of a new day, and with it, the start of a new life for two twin girls and a Palomino horse with amber eyes that seemed to carry within itself the essence of a promise made long ago. The cold light of morning brought with it a merciless clarity to White Pine Ranch. Sheriff Johnson, a middle-aged man with shrewd eyes that seemed to see beyond words, sat in the main room of the house, observing William Montgomery with the calculated attention of someone who had seen many lies crumble under pressure. "So you're telling me you left your 5-year-old daughters alone in a clearing because you heard a noise?" The incredulity in his voice was palpable, though his tone remained professional. William nodded, running a hand through his perfectly combed hair, despite his supposed night of anguish. "It was a terrible lapse in judgment, Sheriff, simply terrible. But I swear it was just that, a momentary mistake. When I came back, they had disappeared with the horse." The sheriff made some notes in his pad, his face impassive. Martha stood near the door, her body tense like a stretched cord. Roy waited outside, speaking in a low voice with the two deputies accompanying the sheriff. "I understand," the sheriff finally said. "And what about the backpack that Mrs. Davis found in the stable? The one containing extra clothes, toys, and food for the girls?" William swallowed hard. "As I said, I planned to spend the whole day out with them, maybe even camp under the stars. I wanted to do something special." "Something special," repeated the sheriff, the words hanging in the air like a silent accusation. "Mr. Montgomery, are you aware of a second will left by your wife?" The question hit William like a physical blow. His eyes widened momentarily before he could regain his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about. Caroline left a single will, which was duly processed after her passing." Sheriff Johnson raised his eyebrows at the euphemism for his wife's death. "Well, it seems she left a second document conditionally sealed with specific instructions to be opened only under certain circumstances." He made a calculated pause. "Mr. Parker handed me this document an hour ago, along with a map found in the clearing where your daughters were abandoned." The color drained from William's face. The map. He was certain he had kept it in the inner pocket of his coat. "How?" "I don't know what map that is," he tried, but his voice came out shaky, devoid of the confidence that had characterized his previous lies. Martha stepped forward. "May I show something to the sheriff?" William shot her a murderous look, but the housekeeper was already walking toward the bookshelf in the corner of the room. From there, she retrieved a thin folder that William had never noticed. "I found this while you were in the forest," she said, handing the folder to the sheriff. "They're copies of emails between Mr. Montgomery and his lawyer in Helena, discussing ways to circumvent the custody clause in Mrs. Montgomery's will." "No, you searched my office." William's voice rose dangerously, but was silenced by the sheriff's severe look. "Mr. Montgomery, I'm beginning to form a rather disturbing picture of yesterday's events," said Johnson, leafing through the documents with a grave expression. "I suggest you remain on the property for the next few days. I have additional questions that will need to be answered." "This is absurd." William rose abruptly. "They're my daughters. I need to see them right now. That horse trainer has no right." "Caroline's second will says exactly the opposite," interrupted the sheriff, his voice as sharp as steel. "In fact, she specifically designated Jacob Parker as the girl's legal guardian in case there was any evidence of neglect or abuse. And abandoning two 5-year-old children in a dense forest, Mr. Montgomery, certainly qualifies as both." William felt the ground disappearing beneath his feet. Everything was falling apart. His carefully crafted plans, his financial future, his freedom. "This isn't possible," he whispered, more to himself than to others in the room. "She wouldn't do this to me." "On the contrary," said Martha, her voice suddenly firm. "Mrs. Montgomery knew exactly what she would do. She told me, shortly before the girls were born, that she had made arrangements to protect them in case something happened to her." William's gaze transformed into pure hatred. "You knew? All this time?" "Not about the specific will, no. But I knew Caroline well enough to know that she would never leave her daughters unprotected." Martha held his gaze without wavering. "And neither would Aspen." The mention of the horse seemed to disorient William even more, as if the animal's name invoked something he was desperately trying to deny. "A horse," he laughed bitterly. "This whole situation because of a damn horse." "Not just any horse," corrected the sheriff. "From what I understand, it was Aspen who saved your daughters yesterday, took them directly to Parker through the forest, along trails that even our most experienced trackers don't know well. Extraordinary, actually." William sank back into the armchair, defeated. The pieces fit together with brutal precision. Caroline had always distrusted him, had always known that he valued her more for her fortune than for her heart. And silently, without his noticing, she had built a protective network around her daughters, a network that included Martha, Parker, and somehow, inexplicably, that damn amber-eyed horse that always seemed to watch him as if it knew his darkest thoughts. Meanwhile, in Jacob Parker's small cabin, the day began with a serenity that contrasted dramatically with the events of the previous night. The twins had awakened with the sun, and after a simple but comforting breakfast, were now in the small pen adjacent to the stable, fascinated by Parker's morning routine as he cared for Aspen. "Does he always eat so much oats?" asked Eleanor, watching the horse devour his breakfast with healthy enthusiasm. "Today he deserves a double portion," Parker replied, smiling. "He had a very busy day yesterday, saving lost princesses." The girls laughed, a crystalline sound that seemed to restore some normalcy to the world. Evelyn slowly approached Aspen, extending her hand to touch his muscular neck. "Mr. Parker," she said softly, "do you think we can stay here, with you and Aspen?" The question, made with the directness of a child's innocence, but carrying the weight of a recent trauma, made Parker pause in his task. He looked at the two girls, so small, so vulnerable, and yet demonstrating surprising resilience. "Well, little one," he answered carefully, "that doesn't depend only on me. There are rules about where children should live, who should take care of them." "But Daddy doesn't want us," said Eleanor, verbalizing the cruel truth that both had understood in their childish way. "He left us in the forest on purpose. We heard him talking on the phone once about getting rid of us." Parker's heart tightened at those words. Even in their naivety, the twins had perceived their father's fundamental rejection, the absence of genuine love that should have been theirs by birthright. "Your mother," said Parker, choosing his words carefully, "was a very intelligent and loving woman. She left instructions in case something like this happened." "What kind of instructions?" asked Evelyn, always the more perceptive of the two. "Instructions that ensure you will always be safe and loved," Parker replied. "And if everything goes as I believe it will, yes, you can stay here with me and with Aspen." The Palomino horse, as if understanding he was being mentioned, raised his head and neighed softly, making the girls smile again. "See?" Parker pointed to the animal. "He agrees." The distant sound of vehicles approaching interrupted the moment. Parker recognized the characteristic rumble of Sheriff Johnson's truck and another sound that seemed to be the car of the county social worker, Sarah Whitman. "We have visitors coming," he announced, extending his hands to the girls. "Remember what we talked about. You only need to tell the truth about what happened yesterday. Nothing more, nothing less." The twins nodded solemnly, each holding one of Parker's calloused hands as they walked toward the cabin. Behind them, Aspen watched attentively, his amber eyes following each movement of the girls, as if he still wasn't fully convinced they were safe. Sarah Whitman was a woman in her early 40s, with brown hair tied in a practical bun and gentle eyes that had witnessed both the best and the worst of human nature in her career. Seeing the twins coming out of the pen, hand in hand with Parker, something in her professional demeanor visibly softened. "Mr. Parker," she greeted, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah Whitman from Social Services, and these must be Eleanor and Evelyn." The girls observed the stranger with the natural caution of children, half hidden behind Parker. "Miss Montgomery," Sheriff Johnson joined them, lowering himself to the girls' height. They recognized him from previous visits to the ranch and relaxed slightly. "I'm very happy to see that you're safe. We were all very worried." "Aspen saved us," said Eleanor, pointing to the stable where the horse was now watching them through the half-open door. "Yes, I heard about that," replied the sheriff, exchanging a significant look with Parker. "It seems you have a very special... a guardian." "Shall we talk inside?" suggested Parker, indicating the cabin. "I made fresh coffee and the girls just had breakfast, but I'm sure they wouldn't mind some more pancakes." As they walked to the cabin, Sarah Whitman carefully observed the interaction between Parker and the twins, the naturalness with which they followed him, the evident trust in their small faces when they looked at him, the protective way he adjusted his pace to match theirs. Everything indicated a bond already solidly established. "Mr. Parker," she said as they settled in the cozy kitchen, "I understand you've known the girls since birth?" "Since before that," he gently corrected. "I knew their mother when she was about their age now, Caroline Bennett, as she was, before becoming Montgomery. Her family had a small farm near town, where they raised some of the best quarter horses in the region. Aspen was born there, actually. And you worked at White Pine Ranch until a few months after Caroline's passing. William dismissed me soon after. Said it was for financial cuts, but I always knew it was because I represented too strong a connection to Caroline, one he preferred to cut." Sheriff Johnson cleared his throat, indicating to the girls the small table in the corner of the kitchen. "How about you start on those pancakes while we chat a bit, young ladies?" Understanding the cue, the twins obediently went to the table, far enough away to give the adults some privacy, but close enough for Parker to keep an eye on them. "Jacob," the sheriff lowered his voice, "the document you gave me, along with the evidence found by Martha Davis and the testimonies we've gathered, everything points to a deliberate attempt at abandonment with intention to cause serious harm, possibly fatal." Parker nodded somberly. Caroline always knew there was something rotten in William's heart. She became increasingly worried in the last months of her life, especially when she learned they would be twins. She said she saw something in his eyes when he talked about the girls, something cold and calculating. "The secret will is quite specific," commented Sarah. "She designates you as legal guardian, Mr. Parker, should William demonstrate criminal negligence or intent to harm the children. Legally, it's a valid document, especially considering it was officially registered and verified by a judge. Which means the girls will be under your temporary custody while we process William," completed the sheriff. "There's no doubt he will be indicted. The map, the emails, the second will, the girls' own accounts, it's a solid case." Parker absorbed the information with a mix of relief and solemnity. He looked at the twins, now engrossed in their pancakes, so small and vulnerable, and yet so strong after all they had faced. "I promised Caroline I would protect them if something like this happened," he said, almost in a whisper. "I just never imagined it would actually be necessary." Sarah studied the man before her, a solitary horse trainer, over 50 years old, living in a modest cabin on the edge of a rural property. Under normal circumstances, he would be an unlikely candidate to receive custody of 2 small children. But there was something about Jacob Parker, a quiet strength and evident integrity, that made the situation seem strangely appropriate. "Mr. Parker, I need to ask, are you prepared for this? Raising 2 5-year-old girls is not a simple task, especially for someone accustomed to living alone. Parker looked at the twins again, then at the kitchen window, through which he could see Aspen in the pen, his amber eyes attentive to the cabin as always. "I won't be alone," he replied simply. "And as for preparation, well, I believe everything in my life has prepared me for this in a way. Besides, Martha has already offered to come work with us. Apparently she has no interest in continuing to serve William." The sheriff smiled slightly. "Martha Davis is one of the best people I know. If she's on board, that certainly increases your chances in the system." At that moment, a sound of hooves on the gravel outside caught everyone's attention. Aspen had left the pen. Parker was sure he had closed the gate and was now walking calmly to the kitchen window, where he stopped, his golden head perfectly framed, amber eyes fixed on the twins. "Aspen!" exclaimed Eleanor, jumping from her chair to run to the window. Evelyn followed her immediately, both smiling broadly at seeing the horse. "That animal is remarkable," commented the sheriff, observing the scene with evident admiration. "Roy told me how he practically demolished the stable when he realized William had returned without the girls. And then finding the way through the forest to your cabin. As I said before," Parker smiled softly, "I won't be alone in raising these girls." Sarah Whitman watched, fascinated, the interaction between the twins and the horse. There was something almost magical in the way the animal lowered his head to receive their caresses through the open window, his intelligent eyes conveying an understanding that seemed to transcend the barriers between species. "You know," she finally said, closing her document folder, "in all my years in social services, I've learned that the best home for a child isn't always the most obvious or traditional one. It's the one where they are truly loved and protected." She paused, watching how the girls laughed as Aspen gently nudged their little hands with his muzzle. And it seems these girls have already found exactly that. In the days that followed, the small community of Pinewood Falls was shaken by the news of William Montgomery's arrest. The respected landowner, apparently dedicated widower, now faced serious charges of child abandonment with intent to cause harm, attempted fraud against his late wife's estate, and various financial crimes discovered during the subsequent investigation. The story of the twins' miraculous rescue by the Palomino horse quickly spread, growing and transforming with each retelling until Aspen acquired an almost legendary status in the region. People stopped on their way to town just to catch a glimpse of the hero horse that now grazed peacefully in the fields around Parker's cabin, recently expanded with the help of practically every man in town. 6 months after the events in the forest, on a golden autumn afternoon, Judge Henderson made official the adoption of the twins by Jacob Parker in a small ceremony at the Pinewood Falls Courthouse. Eleanor and Evelyn, dressed in identical light blue dresses with ribbons in their hair, remained serious and attentive throughout the entire procedure, until the moment when the judge declared that they were now, legally and officially, Jacob's daughters. "Does that mean we can call you Dad now?" asked Eleanor, her clear voice echoing in the nearly empty courtroom. Parker, too moved to speak, simply nodded. "And Aspen?" asked Evelyn, always concerned about the horse's well-being. "He's part of our family too, right?" Judge Henderson, a severe woman who rarely showed emotion in her courtroom, couldn't help but smile. "From what I've heard, Miss Parker, because that's your name now, Aspen is much more than just part of the family. He's the reason you still have one." Outside the courthouse, as if he had heard his name being called, Aspen waited patiently, tied to a post under the shade of an ancient oak. Seeing the twins coming out of the building hand in hand with Parker, he raised his head and neighed softly, his amber eyes shining under the autumn sunlight. "He knows," whispered Evelyn to her sister. "He always knew we would be together." Parker helped the girls mount, laughing when they insisted he should get up too. 3 is too much for old Aspen, he tried to explain. But the Palomino horse snorted as if disagreeing, lowering himself slightly to facilitate the man's ascent. And so, under the blue Montana sky and the admiring gazes of the residents of Pinewood Falls, the unlikely quartet headed home. A man who had found a new reason to live, two girls who had lost and regained the safety of a family, and an extraordinary horse whose amber eyes seemed to contain all the wisdom and all the love in the world. The story of Eleanor and Evelyn Parker, formerly Montgomery, didn't begin or end in that clearing in the forest where they were abandoned. It began years earlier when a woman named Caroline recognized in a man's gaze the absence of the love her daughters would deserve, and planted the seeds of protection that would one day bloom to save them. And it would continue for many years after that day in the courthouse, in the girls' smiles as they rode freely through the fields, in Aspen's silent devotion that would accompany them to the end of his days, and in Jacob Parker's infinite gratitude for having received, in his solitary life, the priceless gift of a family. In Pinewood Falls, people still tell the story of the amber-eyed Palomino horse, who, on a dark night, became the guardian of two abandoned children, guiding them through invisible dangers to the place where they would find true and unshakable love. Some say it was just animal instinct, the natural ability of horses to find their way home. Others, however, especially those who have looked into Aspen's eyes, prefer to believe it was something more, a testimony to the power of love that transcends words, species, and even death. And if you visit that part of Montana today, you might find two identical blue-eyed women running a thriving rescue shelter for horses. And perhaps, if you're lucky, you might glimpse in an elevated field under the setting sun a simple stone statue representing a majestic Palomino horse, immortalized in everyone's memory as the silent protector whose courage and devotion forever changed the fate of a family. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Eleanor and Evelyn and the amazing Aspen has touched your hearts. If you want to continue being moved by stories like this one, subscribe to the channel, leave your like and share in the comments what moved you the most. Here, each story is a reminder that love can conquer even the deepest darkness.